this is Richard Baker, our new painter.
But first of all, I'm honored with the placement, and thank you for that. And fingers crossed that the paintings do well for you.
Oh, I think they're going to do well for us. I really do.
The Hamptons are near and dear to me. I used to have a house in North Haven, just outside of Sag Harbor. I lived in New York City for 11 years. Although I've lived on the West Coast since 1987, the Hamptons are my favorite place. I always enjoy visiting the Hamptons, and I'm charmed by almost everything I see there. The light on the East End makes everything look good. I went for a bike ride a few years ago. I was visiting my friends in Wainscott. This barn is probably in Sagaponack, and saw this barn and this lighting, and stopped the bike and snapped a few pictures. This picture represents a lot of what I enjoy doing. It's representational but has abstract qualities. There's color fields. There's this neoclassic barn that I simplified. I didn't paint the individual shingles. I simplified it. A little bit of impressionistic treatment of the trees and bushes in the background. I try to simplify whenever possible what I'm painting. Some people describe it as reductive. There's just something that's very striking to me about this motif. I also enjoy mixing up these bright sun-filled colors.
Yeah, that line, that big horizontal line across the front, that like brings me back to my childhood, going to Shelter Island. And the color of the sun was so clear to me, and it looked to me, it always used to look like spilled milk. The sun on the dried out grass in August, because we'd usually come in August, and then the shade.
That phenomenon has always fascinated me as a painter, is the effect of sunlight on things.
Well, you know, one of the interesting things that aligns you with my other painters here at the Grenning Gallery, which was really founded to show the art of classically trained painters. But I find myself very curious about, okay, now that you can see the light and you're inspired by the light, what are you doing with that to create a painting? Because copying nature is one stage of it, but taking the inspiration from nature and then creating a two-dimensional image is the next, that's the higher order in many ways. One of the things I often say about Ben Fensky, who's one of my top painters, is that all of his paintings are about the same subject. It's always a light effect that caught his attention that he then investigated. Anyhow, so tell me a little bit about how you first came to the Hamptons. Like what's your background?
My background mostly is as a long-time career in the entertainment business. First as a TV producer, and then as a talent manager, mostly representing comedians who produces their TV shows and movies. When I lived in New York years ago, it was before I was a manager and was a television producer. I lived in the city, and you have to get out of town in the summer when you live in the city somewhere.
Yeah.
Jersey Shore, upstate, Connecticut, or my preference, the Hamptons. So I summered every summer in the Hamptons, and eventually bought a house in North Haven. But I, for 6 years, was one of the producers of the Live from Lincoln Center series on PBS. And in the early days of MTV, when they still had music on the channel, my producing partner, who you met, Bill Boggs, and I were the leading producers the first year MTV was on the air of their hour-long rock concert specials that they used to run every Saturday night.
Oh, so that's cool. So you're talking about early 80s is when you started?
Yeah, I was in the Hamptons from the mid-70s to the mid-80s. Most of my oldest friends still live in New York and have summer places in the Hamptons. So I can see all of them when I come visit in the summer.
Tell me a little bit about your background in painting.
I went to the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business. I actually have a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from the Wharton School.
Wow.
Growing up, I had musical aptitude and played in a rock band, and so I knew I had musical talent, but didn't know I had any talent and certainly had no interest in art. When I went to the business school, I had a lot of electives and took a history of art history class. It was a very popular class, like 500 kids, in my freshman year. And I mainly took it because it was an easy course. But I really enjoyed it. Decided, since I had so many electives, that I would take an introduction to fine art oil painting class in the fine art department my second year, not expecting to have any talent, but just so that I would appreciate some of the technique that goes into paintings when I would go to galleries and museums in the future. That was my only goal.
Yeah.
Turns out the young teacher, emerging young painter named Rackstraw Downs, who came down from New York twice a week to teach one undergraduate and one graduate painting class. Not only did he become a very successful painter later, but he was an incredibly good teacher. He had studied at Yale under Neil Welliver. Neil Welliver was the head of the fine arts department at Penn at that time. Rackstraw was an incredible teacher who, most importantly, taught me how to see as a painter, which is most of the job. Most people just see objects, but as a painter, you have to break down the objects into their component parts and replicate them in colors. So Rackstraw taught me how to see. He was also very specific how he wanted us to apply the paint to the surface. He didn't want individual experimentation and individual styles in his introductory painting class. He wanted us to load up the brush and lay down the paint in thick strokes. If it's the wrong color, scrape it off with the palette knife and lay down another color. A technique that I pretty much still use to this day. Because of his teaching, I was able to hold my own with the fine arts majors in the class and discovered that I had this talent that I didn't know for light and color. Although I couldn't draw as well as the fine arts majors, I was able to hold my own with them, and I wound up studying painting for 3 years with Rackstraw at Penn, and wound up minoring in fine arts and art history, took drawing class, sculpture class, aesthetics class. Susan Sontag is a tough read, from what I recall. I showed Rackstraw some paintings I did one summer, and he flattered me by telling me he thought I had a better eye for light and color than Edward Hopper.
That's pretty good.
It's haunted me ever since. That what if Rackstraw was right, and I have that talent, and I wasn't using it? Right after college, I spent a summer up in Cape Ann, Massachusetts, and lived next door to a successful sculptor named George Demetrius. And I did a lot of artwork that summer, and George was impressed with it and wanted to recommend me for admission to the MacDowell Colony in New Hampshire. He was so impressed with what I was doing, and I thought about it, but I decided to become a TV producer instead. I thought it would be a bigger canvas. That would...
So is that when you were in your career, did you, in your mind, bounce back to things you learned in your painting major? Or do you think it was completely, one did not really relate to or inform the other?
When I produced a TV show, not only did I cover all the business bases, the budgeting, the deal making, all that stuff, but I had creative skills that a lot of producers don't have, or if they have the creative skills, they may not have the business skills. So I brought the whole package. If you looked at any of the shows that I produced back in those days, they had a distinctive look, no matter who the director was, or the lighting director was, or the set designer was. There was a certain look.
That's
neat. It was a very, very interesting career for many years. I still do it on a part-time basis.
You're a full-time painter now for 10 years and a part-time producer.
Yeah, eventually my producing partner, Bill Boggs, and I produced one of the first stand-up comedy TV series called Comedy Tonight, 1987. It was nationally syndicated late night. Bill was the host. It ran locally in New York on Channel 5. We did 110 shows and we had 5 comedians a show. So I worked with hundreds of young comedians. A bunch of the comedians asked Bill and I if we would manage their careers. The last thing in the world I ever thought of doing, because I enjoyed being a producer. So with some reluctance, I went into the talent management business as a side business. After our show went off the air in a year, one of our clients got a development deal in LA with ABC. I moved out to LA to look after him. And we built this management business from the ground up into one of the largest comedy talent management firms in LA. So the first 3 years I was in LA, I told people that I was a producer, did managing on the side. Then I had to start telling people I was a manager, did producing on the side. I had between 30 and 50 clients, and we were very busy, a lot of TV shows and movies, a lot of prominent comedians. But about 9 years ago, to answer your question, one of our famous clients, Carey, decided he was going to do the Price is Right show the rest of his life and didn't need a manager. So we parted ways, and I could have continued plowing ahead in the management business, but I used that as an excuse to pursue my lifelong interest in painting.
Did you have to kind of lock yourself in the studio and look at the blank canvas, like face that fear? Because I'm like you, I always think one day I'll get back to painting.
To finish the story, so after we parted company with Carey, I gave generous severance packages to all my employees, closed our office. This is my office now. I still have my business partner, we have our company, but we cut it down to one client, Tim Allen, who still has a, excuse me?
Very funny. If you're gonna keep one, that was a good one to keep around.
Yeah, so we work with Tim. Right now he's shooting a limited TV series based on the Santa Claus movie series that I'm getting an executive producer credit on. I keep an eye on the production. I went to the first day of filming, gave Tim some advice, but it's really a part-time, sporadic job. Lucrative, but part-time. So it's freed me up to really focus on the painting for the last 9 years or so, where I've done over 100 paintings. I've had 6 solo gallery shows and 1 major corporate gig, and the work is getting a really great reaction, and I'm excited about doing it. So to answer your question, how did it start? Well, with a certain amount of trepidation, because I really only just done 1 painting every few years just to keep my hand in it. Then I really wanted to focus on it, and I didn't know what to expect. Came up with some, it's a new process on how to use photographs that I take as source material. Was really blown away by the work that I started doing. I wound up getting a gallery show in Palm Desert with Melissa Morgan Gallery, and then got a reaction from a gallery, Leah Skidmore's gallery in LA. She was very excited about the early work and wanted to start working with me. And now I'm getting a great reaction from you, and I couldn't be more excited about being in your gallery.
Well, thank you. You mentioned the wildflower painting. That thing is mesmerizing. Where was that painted? Or where was the image?
Well, there's a property right at the entrance to Georgia Beach. What caught my eye was a rustic farmhouse there with the whole yard was wildflowers.
That's Ron Waters, right?
which I was told later is one of Ron Lauder's properties.
Yeah.
These wildflowers, I don't usually do that kind of detail.
Yeah.
More like you see the barn, I like more of the broader planes of color instead of a lot of little stems and leaves. Decided to challenge myself and try and paint these wallflowers because I did see almost a jazz-like.
Yeah.
It's almost like a jazz composition. Looking at it, with their little pops of color and a lot of graphic quality of the stems. I try and create a technique to capture that motif.
Yeah.
The wallflowers, I create a technique where the flowers are representational and really pretty colors, but all the stems and the background greenery are very graphic.
Yeah.
And created different shades of green in the background to give it some texture. So it's simplified, but it still has texture and graphic qualities and all these pops of color. I find I can't keep my eyes still.
Yeah. The visual effect is that it almost feels like you can see the wind moving through the field. That's what happens in front of your eye.
Yeah, my eye keeps moving around that whole canvas. A lot of people paint flowers. I like to keep mixing things up for my own interest.
Well, and you also have two paintings of sailing in this show.
Yeah, well, one painting is a painting I did about 7 years ago that I think is very Edward Hopper-like. The one with the sail in it, that might be called On Georgia Pond. To me, that looks like what a lot of the Hamptons looks like to me, which is this timeless beauty. It could have been Edward Hopper painting it in the 30s.
Yeah, 1920. Yeah.
So that's an older piece, and it's a smaller piece. The newer piece, I call it A Sense of Calm. It's very moody. It's later in the day. So what we film in movies we call magic hour, when the sky's still light, but it's getting dark on the ground. So you get the best of both worlds. And it's just a sailboat docked in one of those little sailboats on Georgia Pond at nightfall. Very subdued palette. Very tranquil. It's an interesting light. It's not fully illuminated. It's not fully dark. It's somewhere in the middle.
And then the one we can finish on is the one that's in our window, which is the little red schoolhouse in Sagaponack. That's like such an iconic image, but the image that you created is even more like, it literally is iconic.
Yeah, so that building has caught my eye for years driving by it. I took a couple of photos. I cleaned up their property a little bit. I got rid of some of the swing sets in the backyard. Yeah. But the color of the schoolhouse, this reddish color, contrasted against the geometric and green landscape bushes in front of it, I'm really happy with. I think it's very, very striking. And then the bushes, they're really good greens. Greens are hard to mix, and they're simplified, but they've got really good texture and form to them, really good sense of geometry. And then there's the combination of the abstract and geometric forms and color fields and just dazzling colors.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Fingers crossed. I hope I do well for you, and thank you for your support.